"Who is this old witch on your chair?" shouted the German officer who entered the office. This is just a girl. She's only 17. We tortured her, and now we're going to dispose of her," the soldier replied and wiped his sweat-soaked brow with his hand. Zina Portnova, a 17-year-old underground fighter who was responsible for the mass poisoning of German officers in the canteen where she worked. Zina did not live to see the victory. She was betrayed, and the Germans who captured the girl tortured her for more than a month, trying to obtain information about the partisans. But how she managed to poison hundreds of Germans, and how the Nazis took revenge on her for it, this is something not for the faint of heart, so keep watching. Pre-war life. "You've got a daughter, Daddy," the nurse told happily Martin Portnoy, who came to visit his wife at the maternity hospital. "Have you come up with a name yet?" "Actually, I was counting on the son," he replied after a slight hesitation. "But a daughter is good too. I don't know yet. I need to think. I need to consult with my wife." "Well, congratulations!" The woman smirked and went about her business. Martin pondered. Some time passed before anything came to his mind, and then he remembered that one of his friends had named his newborn daughter Zina. Well, the name seems good, so let his daughter be Zina too. Zina did not remain the only child of the Portnovs. 8 years later, a second daughter named Galia was born into their family. By the time it was time for her older sister to study, and soon she went to the first grade of school number 385 on Baltic Street. "Today we need to elect a class monitor." That is how one day the class teacher began the meeting. "I suggest Zina Portnova. She is an excellent student and in general a responsible person. What do you say?" There were no objections from the students. They knew all this themselves and trusted their classmate. So Zina became the class monitor, managing to combine her social responsibilities with her studies and dance classes. "Who are you planning to become?" her friend asked her once. "Well, I don't know. Probably a doctor. Although may also be a ballerina. I don't know for sure yet," Zina replied then. War and underground. "Girls, get up quickly! War!" This frightening exclamation woke Zina. "Get ready quickly, we're going home!" Zina stared in the first second uncomprehendingly. What war? The beginning of the war was a catastrophe for the Soviet army. In Belarus, the Germans advanced rapidly. On the sixth day, they entered Minsk and moved further east. Therefore, although Zina with her sister and aunt reached Vitebsk, they could no longer manage to leave for Leningrad. The city ended up occupied. So they had to go to the settlement of Obol, where their grandmother lived. Here the family stopped. They had nowhere else to go. Several months passed, during which she met many local young people. And one day, one of her new acquaintances, who had been watching her for a long time, asked her, "Do you want to fight the fascists? Well, you will have such an opportunity. Come to the swamp via the path tomorrow. People will be waiting for you there. They want to talk to you." The next day, Zina arrived at the agreed place, where she was met by local underground members. After the talk, Zina was accepted into the Young Avengers organization, where she became the youngest member. After this, Zina and her comrades were given a new assignment: to find out the strength of the local garrison troops. They did this, and the information went to the partisans, who fully took advantage of it. The next few months, Zina gained underground work experience, and then she was entrusted with a much more complex and dangerous task. In the vicinity, there was an officer retraining school for tankers and artillerymen, and the underground fighters had the idea of poisoning as many fascists as possible. This task was assigned to Zina, who was hired as a support worker in the officers' dining hall. For several weeks she earned the Germans' trust and eventually was allowed to enter the kitchen directly, bringing firewood and water there. And then one day the girl was handed several packets of poison. "Isn't it too little here?" she asked with doubt. "Don't worry, they will have enough," came the reply. A few days later, the dishwater fell in the kitchen and Zina replaced her. This made it easier for her to access the food cauldrons, but she couldn't manage to throw poison into them for a long time. The cook and his assistant were always hovering around them. But Zina was lucky. One of them left and the second one got distracted for a few seconds, putting the firewood she had brought into the stove. Then the girl threw the powder into the soup that was boiling in the cauldron, which a few dozen German officers ate a little later, after which they moved right to the nearest cemetery. As expected, the Nazi initiated an investigation, but the cook and his assistant asserted that the girl who was substituting for the dishwasher never went near the cauldrons. They were apprehensive about being held responsible for their possible error. But the Germans still decided to test Zina and treated her the same soup with poison. If she refuses, it means she knows the food is poisoned, said the investigator. Knowing about the deadly danger, the girl still ate a few spoonfuls of soup. This convinced the Germans that she was not guilty and they let her go home, which she reached with great difficulty. Zina survived, but the partisan leadership decided that it was too dangerous for her to stay in view and transferred her to the forest with the partisan detachment. Here she learned to shoot accurately and become a scout, obtaining information about the enemy and contacting the remaining underground resistance. By the end of August 1943, the young Avengers continued to fight the enemy, but one day, a certain Mikhail Grichukin came to the local police chief, Akray. "Mr. Commander, I will name those participants in the underground," he said obligingly. "Very good," answered Akray. "Sit down and write." Thus, the fascists succeeded in arresting almost all the Avengers. Zina managed to escape this time, but not for long. Torture and execution. In one of the villages, she was recognized by a relative of the local policeman. "Why you're just standing there when a partisan is walking through your village?" she screamed. Thus Zina was arrested and taken to the police to Akray. He demanded from her the names of the underground fighters, contacts, passwords, and other information. But the girl remained silent. "All right, as you wish. Then we will transfer you to the Gestapo and let them deal with you," said the chief of police. Thus, the interrogation of Zina was conducted by the local chief, Captain Krause. First, he decided to play the good cop. "Are you hungry? Here, white bread, butter, candies. Only one small favor and you will go home. Just name your superiors and comrades, and that's it." Zina was silent. Then Krause pulled out a gun and began to intimidate her. But then a car stopped and honked near the house. So he left in on the table and walked to the window to see who had arrived. A vague noise in the room made him turn around. The muzzle of his own pistol was aimed at him. But before the Gestapo officer realized what was happening, a shot rang out and he collapsed to the floor. The door opened and the officer who rushed in also didn't have time to understand anything. The second shot took him down too. Zina dashed into the hallway and then ran across the yard to the river, beyond which there was a forest. But the chase was already underway. After she managed to shoot another soldier, she ran out of bullets. Unfortunately, she failed to reach the forest. "So you killed our people and decided to run away. Okay, now you will definitely speak up," yelled at Zina the Gestapo officer, angered by the death of his colleagues. "Even the dead speak with us." After that, the Nazis were driven only by rage. They tortured her not for information, but to inflict as much terrible suffering as possible, to make the girl scream and beg for mercy. They burned her with iron, cut off her ears, gouged out her eyes, twisted her arms and crushed her fingers. Her hair had turned entirely gray due to the suffering she had experienced. 3 weeks later. "What about that girl who poisoned our officers? Started talking?" One officer asked his colleague from another district. The officer immediately darkened and silently shook his head. "Silent. You know, we can get anyone to talk, but whatever they did to her, tortured with fire, hung by her legs, cut into pieces, she remains silent. This is the first time I've come across this." "She is fanatic. There are many of them here," answered the Gestapo officer after a short pause. "So what now?" His companion shrugged. "Shoot? What else?" And both fell silent, each immersed in their own thoughts. It all ended on January 10th, 1944.